This water starts out in a small artesian spring, what Costa Rica calls an artesian well. It travels about a mile through the jungles and down that mountain. And now I have an endless supply of some of the cleanest water in all of the world. However, there are a lot of people that have come to Costa Rica, got excited, bought a piece of property, but when it came time to actually build a house on that property, they lacked one very important thing that Costa Rica requires in order for them to build. Well, in today's episode of Is That Legal?, my co-host and I will be telling you everything you need to know about when it comes to water and building your dream home in Costa Rica. All right, welcome back, folks. I am excited. I have a topic for you I can't wait to share with you because I recently got some great news from my co-host Cristina. And today, hey, another episode of Is That Legal? You know, in Costa Rica, there's so many things that you wouldn't think about. But gosh, every time you turn around, you're wondering, is that legal? Well, that's why we have this show. Cristina, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you, Alan. How are you?
Wonderful. And I'm excited because today, you know, we're going to be talking about that water letter. You know, I didn't even know such a thing existed. And well, a lot of people don't know that existed. And so what happens is that, well, people end up buying a piece of property and, you know, they don't know, they didn't do their due diligence. They didn't know what they were supposed to do. And all of a sudden they get ready to build and they come to find out they don't have a water letter. Well, what is a water letter?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm so happy we are doing this episode today because it is really a big deal for anyone who owns or buy a property to have water letter, especially if they intend to use that land to build, you know. So what is a water ladder? It's a piece of paper, one of the many pieces of papers that you need when you're in Costa Rica and you want to build. It's a piece of paper that establishes that your property has water that can be used, you know, for residential use, and thus you can build. Without this piece of paper, you cannot build because one of the requirements to obtain a building permit is to submit a water letter.
A water letter. Okay. Well, before we go too deep into that, you know, from time to time, folks, Cristina and I are going to bring on a guest. And today she has a guest in the background. So let me bring him on and let Cristina introduce him because I think he has a few things that he can share with us as well about that water letter.
Hi all, how are you doing? I hope you're doing great. Thank you, Alan and Cristina, for this interview. I hope I can help you with the subject that we're going to talk about and to resolve some legal issues. Yeah, or prevent.
Exactly. So before we jump into this, something that I think a lot of our guests don't know is that, well, congratulations are in order because, you know, Cristina has done so well here in Costa Rica. And for those that haven't met Cristina, Cristina started out many years ago as an attorney in Italy, and now she has come over to Costa Rica. She has thrived and now has created, you know, she already had one endeavor that she outgrew and now is the CEO of Blue Zone Legal. And we have her first guest today, who is Blue Zone Legal's attorney and notary, Eddie, that's here with us today. So, hey, congratulations. I am so stoked and so happy for you, Cristina.
Thank you. That's so kind of you. This is a surprise. And I didn't know you were going to talk about this, but thank you so much. And Blue Zone Legal is my new project. I'm super excited to be sharing this with you, and I'm so happy to have Eddie on team.
Yeah, very proud of Cristina, and Cristina has a long experience right here in Costa Rica. dealing with law stuff, and she have great experience. And actually, I'm here as the one has that is going to be interviewed, but Cristina knows more about the law right here than anybody that I know.
Wow, that's good to know. Well, I've said it so many times because so many people on my channel, some of them are entrepreneurs, and I tell them that, look, Costa Rica is an entrepreneur's paradise. And I tell them, I say, look, not saying anything bad about the Ticos, but it's a good thing that they love family. So their work ethic is not where most foreigners are. Most foreigners are they working so hard, and well, that's the reason so many are leaving the United States, because they're tired of being on that hamster wheel. They're tired of that fast pace. And so I've often said that, hey, if a foreigner comes over here and if they do anything, whether it's in the legal field, building a restaurant, any kind of business, they're always going to excel. They're going to do phenomenal. And Cristina is obviously proof that that is the truth. I mean, she came over here and boy, she just hit it running. And one of the things I think, kudos to her, is that, number one, hey, I think everybody knows it's no secret. When you come to Costa Rica, it is difficult to find an honest attorney. A lot of people have heard the nightmares of people buying property and the attorney put it in his name, or something wasn't right, or maybe even just getting the gringo price. Well, Cristina being extremely honest, great work ethics. Well, no wonder she is just growing and growing and growing. So I'm just excited. So just real happy for you.
Thank you.
So let's
Thank
get
you so much.
started. So today we're talking about that water letter that, I don't think we have to have a water letter in other countries. I know not in the United States, but, as I was saying earlier, just before we brought you on, Eddie, it happens all the time. People come to Costa Rica. They're all excited. They fall in love. And, hey, I can't blame them. They want to buy a piece of property. And in Costa Rica, well, look, I don't care where you're at. Somebody, you're out eating, you're having a good time on the beach. Some tico's going to come and say, oh, I got a piece of property. It's beautiful. You've got to buy my property. And of course, you go look at it and you're excited and you buy it, not knowing how important it is to get that due diligence, to make sure that it doesn't have a lien, make sure that everything's in order, make sure it has a title. And most importantly, hey, make sure that you have a water letter so that you can build. Because if you don't have that water letter, well, now you've got a piece of property and you can't build a house on it, right?
Not quite, but almost certain. Actually, the water is a constitutional right in Costa Rica. So everybody that has a property and is going to build may have in our constitution the right to have water, but that doesn't guarantee you that you're going to have water in your property and that they're going to give you a water letter, in this case, to build a building or a house or whatever you want to build in your land. Actually, if you fight for it, you will get it. You will get it, but it will take years of fighting for your water. So as Cristina said before, one of the most important issues that we have to deal with the properties right here in Costa Rica and getting a property right here in Costa Rica is the water. And that's the first thing we're going to check in our due diligence.
That begs me to ask that question. Look, I come here, I buy a piece of property, and I didn't know that I had to check for a water letter. Now I own a piece of property. 6 months later, I find out I don't have a water letter. Is that legal? I mean, can they do that? Can I buy a piece of property is it legal to sell me a piece of property that doesn't have a water letter?
Yes, you may get a property without a water letter.
So yes, it's legal. In other words, it's my own fault if I didn't get the due diligence done. So obviously the owner, he's trying to sell you anything. It's kind of like, it's kind of like I can sell you the Brooklyn Bridge.
And if you buy it and you don't verify that I actually own it, well, that might not be legal. But in other words, someone can sell you a piece of property, but it's not their responsibility to check and see if it has a water letter. Okay. It's your due diligence. It's important that you get attorneys to check you out. So it is legal. If it's his property, he can sell it to you. However, it's your fault. It's your responsibility before you buy it to have that due diligence to see if you have a water letter. Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's say, here's a scenario. I have that property and I've been having it for a year and I want to build, but I can't get that elusive water letter. Well, Cristina told me not too long ago. She was excited. She sent me a message. Hey, Alan, guess what? Something new has happened that's going to help some of these people that don't have a water letter. Cristina, tell me about it.
Sure. So at the end of the last year, the rules regarding artesian well changed. So, but one step back, how can you have water in your property? There are different ways. You can have water from the public institution, whether it is AYA or an Asada, or if they don't provide the water in your property, you could have a well on your property, which could be an artesian well, meaning that you dig it, manually, so to say, or you could have an industrial well, dig, in an industrial manner when you need to go deep down to get water. Okay, so in the past, if you were to use an artesian well, you could obtain a water concession for that well, and that was the so-called water letter that we were mentioning before that could allow you to have a building permit. What changed when I texted you super excited? What changes that starting the end of the past year, in theory, and I will explain why I say in theory later, if you put an artesian well on your property, you no longer need to register the well before the water institution of Costa Rica, which was a step necessary to obtain the water letter. So in theory, to have the building permit, you no longer need to record the well, the artesian well for domestic use only before the Dirección de Agua. Okay, you just dig a well, and then in theory, you should get the building permit. So this is supposed to be a great news because in theory, the process is simpler. You no longer have to wait like 6 to 10 months to get a water concession for your well, to get the well recorded and everything, to be able to submit the documents to further obtain the building permit. Now you just have the well. But immediately after being super happy and celebrating, I'm like, wait a second. So I just put a well there. Then who is going to certify that it is a proper well? Who is going to certify that, I comply with all the rules that need to be complied with when you make an artesian well? And this is the problem. As of today, nobody knows. So what has happened from the moment we last spoke? So there are the new rules, but most of the municipality don't know how to proper implement them. So now it is up to the 84 municipality of Costa Rica to decide what they want for the water letter if you have an artesian well. Some municipalities, for example, the municipality of Nicoya, accept the fact that you can just have an artesian well. They are correctly now requesting you to record it. Other municipalities are saying, no, I know that the law changed, but we still need a concession for the well, for the artesian well, which honestly doesn't make any sense, because if you go and ask for the concession or the artesian well for the domestic use, you're not going to get it because the law changes. So they're saying, no, why are you requesting this? We cannot issue this because the law changes. So it is very tricky. For example, this is an issue in the Santa Teresa area because the municipality is still asking for the concession of the well. So they want the well to be recorded, but you cannot comply with the requirement. It's impossible.
What's important is that if I buy a piece of property
It's time for you to join me for an action-packed 7-day event where we learn everything you need to know about living in Costa Rica. The only live event where you learn everything. I'm talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. This way you'll be well informed before you make that decision to live in Costa Rica. During this life-changing event, you'll learn from a panel of experts teaching on many different topics and not only get all of your questions answered, but have the time to network with the experts and other attendees at this jam-packed week located at beautiful Sunset Del Mar Beach Resort. While you're learning about the number one most important thing you must know to enjoy your new life in Costa Rica, we're going to start experiencing this new life together while you're here with some local tours. From adrenaline pumping excitement to relaxing sunsets on the most beautiful beach in all of Costa Rica. Attending one of our Costa Rica relocation events is by far the most important thing you can do towards preparing yourself for a possible transition to Costa Rica. The best rooms are going fast and we're limited to how many can attend. So register now and get your ticket to this life-changing event today.
And there is an artesian well on it. I just know that, hey, the law has changed, and it's pretty common that a new law will be implemented in Costa Rica, but it takes time for it to get implemented in maybe the different municipalities. But as long as we know it's there, that's good news. It will happen, and once it gets implemented, things could happen a little bit quicker. It's just that, hey, this is a new law. It is good news, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So let me back up because let's define the definition of an artesian well, because in the United States, and I think the definition of an artesian well, Costa Rica might be a little different. So correct me if I'm wrong. In the United States, an artesian well is if I have a piece of property and I'm walking on that piece of property. An artesian well is where I would go somewhere and I can see water begins bubbling, or water has been bubbling out of the ground. Water's coming from the ground right there all on its own. And from that spot right there, that water begins bubbling out of the ground and it creates a little stream or a little creek and it runs over. That is the definition of an artesian well. And a lot of people in the United States, they might have an artesian well like that, and it's bubbling out of the ground. And a lot of times they'll put cement around it, they'll cap it, and then they can use that, as good, clean water for their home use. Okay, so that's an artesian well. Is that the same thing in Costa Rica, or is it slightly different in Costa Rica?
Oh, Eddie, you want to take this?
Yeah, it's a slight different because it has to have certain qualities to be considered as an artesian well. And it has to make manually for extraction and underwater in a limit flow, and it should have all the conditions for an artisanal elaboration. So that means that not every well is going to be considered artesian. Also, it's good for you to know that there are many legal wells in Costa Rica. And now they want to regulate it with this directrice that they're sending right now.
Okay, so an artesian well that I talked about would be similar, but they want to come out and qualify it based on flow rates or on a few other things before they qualify it as an acceptable water source for your home.
Yes.
Okay. And so, but what we need to know is that, hey, if you have an artesian well that does meet the criteria, then you will be able to get that water letter. And because the law has changed, then you're not required to have it registered, and you're not required to get a concession for it because that law changed.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. So we talked about getting a water letter, can't get the water letter. Now you have an artesian well, can get it. Well, what if we don't have an artesian well on the property? I don't have a water letter and I don't have an artesian well. I don't have water that comes out of the ground on its own. Can I actually hire someone to come and drill a well on my property so that I can obtain a water letter?
Okay, yes, that will be an industrial well. That is in theory possible, but again, in theory. Why in theory? Because you will need an hydrogeologist to verify if in fact there is water, how deep it is, and the hydrogeologist, together with our legal team, will need to verify that there are no environmental or other legal restrictions. For example, there are certain areas where it is at the moment not possible to dig an industrial well. I think like Tamarindo is one of them.
Okay, so there's some places, and I guess like anywhere, there are some restrictions. But if you don't have some of those restrictions in place, you can pay someone to come drill a water well, and in that way, you will be able to get that water letter, and you'll be able to build. However, keep in mind that when I last researched, drilling a water well in Costa Rica was almost twice the normal price as it cost in the United States or in Louisiana, where I was from. So it is very costly to do that. However, I don't know if I should bring this up or not, but there, you can tell me, is that legal or not? I know some ticos who have hand dug their own well. So is that legal?
No, it is not. That's an illegal well. Actually, you have to get all kind of studies, hydro studies, and you have to get maps of the land, the subterranean maps, and you have to know how deep is your water, how the pump measure of it, and you have to do a lot of stuff so you won't messed up a resource that we appreciate right here in Costa Rica.
See, in the United States, and I'm sure there's probably some restrictions and laws, but in most cases, it's not difficult at all to drill a well, and a lot of people will drill their own water wells. Okay, I've drilled my own water well in the United States or in Louisiana, but in Costa Rica, it is not legal. You need to have a hydrologist, and you got to get permits, and you can't just go and dig your own well in Costa Rica. That is not legal. Am I correct?
That's not legal. Yes.
Okay, I'm glad we're having this episode on Is That Legal? Now you know if you dig your own well, it's not legal. All right. So, anyway, that's great news. So now we know we've got some options here. If I buy a piece of property and I didn't have the due diligence done, I've got options. I couldn't get the water letter, but hey, if I have an artesian well and it qualifies as an artesian well, just keep in mind that, hey, that law has changed, but that's one way to get a water letter. And we can, if we don't have any restrictions, we can actually have an industrial water well dug, drilled, and then that's an option. So those are the three options that we have to get a water letter if we are denied the first time. Is that right?
Well, again, connecting to the water of the Asada, for example, where, one of our two offices at Luzon Legal, we have one office in San Jose and another one in the Nosara area. And in the developments of Nosara, it's very common to have the water infrastructure arriving like to the neighbor, and you have to just continue the infrastructure. And sometimes what they do is that the Asada requires you very kindly to donate the infrastructure to the Asada so that they can bring the water up to you. But, if the Asada doesn't arrive to your property, you could pay for the infrastructure to bring the water to your property directly from the Asada.
Okay, so like in my case, Asada is nowhere near me, but if I wanted to pay and dig that line all the way to wherever Asada is at, I could do that, and they would supply me with water, but then they would want me to donate everything that I have dug to them.
Yeah. In many cases, now I'm not saying that that's a rule that you have to donate that, but it's very typical, so to say.
Okay, it's very typical. Well, how about this? There's some people that are living off grid like I am. If they have to have a water letter to build and they can't build, is it possible that they say, well, hey, look, we're going to set up a rainwater collection system for their house? Is that possible?
Actually, yes, it is, but it's not. It's not your water letter or your permit to have water or to build in your house. You cannot obtain a construction construction permit with rain with the rainwater tank that you're going to install in your house.
Even though I can tell them, okay, when I want to build a house and I'm going to do rainwater collection, they're not going to give me they're not going to give me the permits I need to build with that.
Exactly.
After I build, well, then if I want to collect rainwater, I can, but that's not going to satisfy any requirements to give me the permits I need to build. I'm going to have to find some other way to get a water letter. After I get the water letter and I get the permits to build, after I build, well, then I can decide afterwards to use rainwater or use Asada or drill a well. Now, I know here's one other option, and I don't know that anyone's actually covered this topic, but because I live very remote, I know a lot of people actually will put lines in the river. I know my neighbor, and well, I think everybody that lives out in this area, they just put a water line in the river and they're collecting water from the river. They find a river that's uphill from them, and then they bring water to their house. Is that legal?
No, it's not. Actually, it's a felony.
No.
Maybe just let's not give the exact position and let's not call the name of your neighbors,
Okay. So it happens all over Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Because I've seen it everywhere in Costa Rica. People will put a water line in the river, but technically it's not legal. Yet there's a lot of people that are doing it. And of course, Costa Rica is very big, and it's very important that water is a right. Everyone has a right to have water. And so I guess that's what some people are doing, is that they're getting water from a river so that they can have water for their houses. Okay. So maybe I opened up a can of worms I shouldn't have opened up.
Another very common question that, foreigners especially make when they buy a property, they're saying, no, the seller told me that I don't have water, but the neighbor is super friendly. And she said, I can just pay for water and she will just give me water. This is important. Is this legal, Eddie?
No, it is not legal. Well, actually, if you have a permit, yes, but it will take a long time to get a permit to sell water.
Okay, so the moral of that story is that, hey, Atico's going to try to sell you some property. They're going to tell you the neighbor is super nice. She'll more than gladly share her water or sell you her water, but that's not legal. So, and that's not going to get you a water letter either, and you won't have permits to properly build on that property. So beware of that, right?
Yes.
Okay, so one other thing before we wrap this up, unless you've got something that we really need to know, is that it's also important to know something that's very different than in the United States. Because in the United States, I can drill a well. And when I drill a well, it costs me a lot of money to drill that well. But that water is mine and it's free for the rest of my life. If I drill a well in Costa Rica, is that water mine and is it free for the rest of my life?
The water in Costa Rica is not private, owned by the government. So every well that you will have, every water that you have in your house, or any source of water that you may get in your property is going to be always for the government. You may use it as a concession for a certain period of time, but always is going to be for the government and for the people of Costa Rica.
Okay, so I could pay $60,000 and have a well dug on my property. I'm still going to have to pay the government however much they decide every month for the use of that water as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. Also, yeah. If you, it depends on
Okay.
of your
Well,
water company, yeah, or Asada.
because either you're going to pay Asada. If you hook up to Asada, of course, you're going to pay them monthly, just like anywhere else. But if you drill a well, well, you're still going to pay the government monthly for that water as well. So it is, that's one, I guess that's really a good and a bad thing. Costa Rica really protects its environment. They love their water. The water is not private. You don't own the water underneath your property. The government owns it. So you do have the right to use it. You just have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess one final clarification is important regarding the artesian well. We were saying that you do not need a concession, but it's important to note you don't need it if the artesian well is for residential use, for the water for your home, for example. If you want to use it for commercial purposes, then you will need a concession. So that's another
Well, that's good to know. Most people, if they had an artesian well, they're going to be using it just for their residents, so they wouldn't need a concession. But if I'm an entrepreneur and I'm like, wow, this water is super clean, and I'm going to start bottling it and start selling it for commercial purposes, I've got to get a concession then.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, this has been great. Is there anything else that we need to know about water in Costa Rica as far as we're talking about building a house? Is there anything else that we really should know about a water letter or water for building?
As a Costa Rican, I will add, and there's something that maybe foreigners don't understand, is that our biggest resource in Costa Rica is nature, and water is part of it, of those resources that we take care so much of it, and we love nature. I understand most of the foreigners that come here love nature.
Absolutely. Cristina, any last words?
No, I think that was it.
Fantastic. Well, look, hey, Eddie, we're so glad you was able to join us today. Cristina, it has been fun doing yet another episode of Is That Legal? And I can't wait till we do our next one. So, folks, make sure that you leave your comments. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure you subscribe. If you want to know more about Cristina and Eddie and the whole Blue Zone Legal, make sure that you click on that link below, hit that PDF. You can download that PDF for free, and that way you have the contact information, and make sure that you have Blue Zone Legal on your side before you do anything in Costa Rica. All right, folks, that's it for Is That Legal? We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.